Alright, another draft physics video production. Alright, presentation. Anyway, the previous presentation had this weird little jump in view numbers, where it doubled for a few hours. Assuming it was like an email chain maybe or something like that, because it didn't have any durability. I mean, it is back to normal. Yeah, so whatever it is, it's transient. It wasn't some place where there was some sort of more energy to it. But anyway, no comments left, so I was curious. So maybe it's just a Fermi Lab thing. Somebody sent an email out. They're talking about us. Yeah, something like that. But anyway, like I said, no one had the courage to comment, so who knows where it came from. But that's the kind of thing that does have to happen somewhere here in this process. So anyway, comments. And maybe some talk on the right-hand rule and the foundations, the whole spinning atom thing or something. Anyway, Age of Reason, who doesn't get too much right. Got some of this wrong. Hi Gary, I like where you brought up the number 6. Yeah, well that just sounds too stupid. I brought it up because there's 2 force bits and 2 matter bits and 2 kinds of interactions. It just doesn't mean anything. It's a 6 that just could have been a 4, could have been a 8. Could have been anything. Ugh. I want to listen to the initial video where you explain this. Well, you have to go back a few months for the 2 + 2 + 2 thing. I'll look for it on your channel. I'm just so excited. You see it in my face. Anyway, so then he says, damn, you beat a charge as a pro se litigant? No, I wasn't charged with anything. No. Okay. I was prosecuting a case. Just happened to be a YouTube thing. The whole idea of what the Digital Millennium Copyright Act was supposed to mean. It was basically a fair use case in the sense that I was arguing that it's not fair use to steal other people's content and use it maliciously. That's fundamentally against the law. That you have to be using it honestly to educate, and if you're obviously lying, then you're not educated. But anyway, and yes, it was impossible to prosecute. It took years, and this was a horrible waste of my time because judges are lunatics. They don't know what the law is. They have no idea. They don't know what the Constitution is. They don't. The whole concept escapes them. They're just such assholes, and because look, if we elected them, they'd still be assholes, but they'd be politicians. But it's even worse. They're essentially elected by politicians, the lying scum of the earth, and of course they're lying scum. I mean, it's just terrible. Anyway, just. You could throw a Supreme Court decision right in their face, and it's just they don't care because they can do whatever they want now, especially now because now they rig the system where they have something called an unpublished decision, and the unpublished decision means, well, I don't have to account for this. No other judge can use it as an argument. You can't present one of these unpublished cases and say, look, this is what Judge Harrington or whoever did in this case. Can't use it. So the judge can do whatever the fuck he wants. No one's going to call him on it. So anyway, it's just a terrible system. But anyway, I wasn't charged with anything. I was attempting something even more extraordinary, to prosecute a case as a pro se. They hate that even more. That is so anti-lawyer, to do that, to fiddle with prosecuting cases. It's bad enough that these pro ses defend themselves, but it's even worse when they attempt to prosecute a case. How dare they? Anyway, you must have a lying shyster. If you don't pay a lying shyster, it's not a real court case. You know, you're not making a real argument. It's just such bullshit. Anyway, so I didn't beat a charge. In a sense, I beat the judge, which is the only part that matters. I mean, the judge made an insane summary judgment decision that was just insanely stupid, and I just went to the appeals court and said, hey, this was insanely stupid. Okay, I mean, he shouldn't even be a judge, he's so fucking dumb. Okay, so excellent to hear, never knew. Slander is always the last line of defense, right? Fuck them. I don't know. It seems to be the first resort for the cheaters and the liars and the thieves, so I'm just saying, for the average American, it seems exactly what they do. They don't care about the fucking facts. So anyway, truth, fuck that. I mean, it's just so obvious. I don't. There's no point in even making references. There's, just look who's president, for fuck's sake. A psychopathic liar. Just a purely insane person. I mean, I said he was insane 20 years ago. I mean, he's been insane for a long fucking time. Anyway, I mean, he's lost more money than he's made. Fuck. What a successful man. At what? Lying. Amazing. Anyway. This is so dismal. I mean, not that there's some alternative. It really isn't. Alright. So, another comment that, it's okay. I mean, all this analyzing the circumstances, okay, I suppose. He'd be in the news already. Colossal stupidity at work here. Impression-dependent NPCs. I don't know what any of that fucking shit means. But anyway, unfortunately, most of the people who watch for 5 seconds depend on their beliefs. Yes, this is obviously a problem. Subjects are complex. People don't want to do the complex part. They just want the answer. Tell me, global warming, yes. Global warming, no. I want the truth. I don't want to have to understand anything. I don't want to have to do any work. And that's it. So yeah, that's how the world runs. That includes university grads, because unfortunately most are nothing but indoctrinated parrots incapable of thinking for themselves. Yeah, I don't know if they're incapable. I think it's just outside of their habit, and their comfort zone. So it's not really encouraged, I suppose. It's kind of a daunting task, actually, because you really have to do this process of really going into the details again. So it's, nobody wants to get too detail oriented, and it's difficult. It's difficult. The more stuff you're trying to juggle, the easier you can make it, the easier it is, right? So it's simple. Keep it simple, stupid. I mean, it does work for a lot of things, but it doesn't work for things like crime solving, maybe, or physics. Funny thing is, if you were to present the exact same model dressed in a suit and tie or lab coat, I don't know, I think I'd still look a little ridiculous. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, in front of a bunch of scientists or actors, with a well-adorned with credentials and a chalkboard covered in obscure formulas, and people called you doctor or professor, suddenly everyone would believe it. Yeah, I think it'd still require there to be, you'd have to be one of them, you'd have to be recognized for your stupidity. Like Degrassi Tyson, right? I mean, he only has any fame because he claimed Pluto wasn't a planet. And then they found out it has moons, and, it seems kind of silly to, unplanet it. now. So I mean, you know, he's famous for no good reason, really. Uh, he's just riding on Carl Sagan's coattails, and but yeah, people listen as if he's somehow a better physicist than all these other physicists. So it really depends on where you're positioned in the, you know, whatever hierarchy. So certainly if Michio or one of the other nutters were proposing this theory, they'd certainly pay attention, and you know, they'd have to answer his questions, and you know, they would look ridiculous trying to. You know, it wouldn't be much more rewarding, though, since they don't try to understand. Their lazy minds are only considering superficial things to determine whether or not they should believe. Basically, they're retards looking for God. Well, it does seem to be a huge bias in, you know, especially mostly, and you can see it in dissidents. The dissidents seem to be motivated by an awful lot of fluffernutter bullshit, you know, metaphysics, you know, the Ken Wheeler types, and you know, their physics has a presumption in it that, you know, somehow you know, there's moreness, you know, not lessness, as you go deeper. Anyway, I agree. The proposal that photons are affected by gravity twice as much doesn't make sense. Well, it's a hell of an assertion, right? I mean, and it's only being made for one kind of stupid reason. You know, this assumption that photons are going to even be affected by gravity. I mean, once you make the assumption, you are stuck with the Einstein thought experiment, where you say, well, in a rocket ship, the photons will be bent a certain amount, in the sense that the photons are going to go straight and the side of the ship is going to move. And it's going to move at a certain rate, and the photons are going to curve a certain amount. Yeah, they're not curving. They're going straight. They're just hitting a lower place on the side of the ship, right? And so if you're going to play this idiotic game and say, well, everything has to be the same, I mean, the movement of the ship is the same as the gravity's movement of matter, then you have to force photons essentially to do something stupid and on Earth, you know, in the gravity, and move just as much, you know, be displaced in its, you know, as much. And so in that sense, it's logically consistent, but the axiom was wrong in the first place. Why would you think photons are affected by gravity? They weren't affected in the spaceship. The side of the ship moved, okay? The photons didn't move anywhere. They didn't go anywhere. They didn't change. If there was no ship, they would hit a spot. If there is a ship, they would hit a spot. The same spot. They didn't move at all. The ship moved. You know, I mean, it's, you know, the logic is just fundamentally flawed, but it's because they're going to try to force a wrong choice. They either are or are not affected by gravity, and they just chose badly, as they often have. Physics has often chosen badly. All right, wherever I was. All right, it's made of the same thing moving at the speed of light. Well, that's the other part of it's kind of stupid, is not to realize that the force stuff obviously doesn't interact with the force stuff. We already knew that, you know, in principle, because the forces don't blend on their own. They need something to do the blending. It's like saying gravity at a frequency is affected twice as much as by gravity. Well, certainly if you understand that the forces are all the one force, that photons are essentially just gravity at a frequency, then yes, you understand that. When we can already see that they only interact with matter, atmospheres, electrons, that's where light is being bent. Yes, and it's obviously not being bent, it's interacting and having its direction changed. So it's not really bending. But anyway, it's not curving, let's say. larger bodies would tend to have more atmosphere surrounding them, thus more bending. Well, I don't even think that is relevant, because I don't think the bending is in the direction of the thing. I mean, you could argue that the stuff ejected from the sun spends more time drifting back into the sun than it spends going out of the sun. And so you can make some equation that you might say there's a greater probability you're hitting something if you had to go through that stuff. You would be hitting something going back, because more stuff is going back than is leaving. Something like that. But I don't know if that could matter anyway. The point is that's called scatter. It's not any uniform symmetrical bending. The magnetic FX are the electrons. Let's see. Large bodies would tend to have more atmosphere surrounding them, thus more bending. Okay, well, like I said, bending would be the wrong term in that case. You just use more scatter. So, and obviously scatter can be received by an observer at any one point as being kind of personal. Like, it just scattered my way. No, it's scattered every way. Everybody can see anything, because anything was created by the scatter. Alright, but anyway. As mentioned, we can't bend light with magnets, which is polarized gravity. Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it polarized. That's, obviously light, but anything. The polarization is the spread of it. So again, it's not really like it's polarized in the magnetic sense. It's not north and south. But anyway, the magnetic FX are in the electrons. Clearly, they're the things that have charge, and magnetism is just a variation of charge. Yes, they aren't really electromagnetic. Well, it's just not right to call them. They do make the phenomenon, but yes, they're the force. They're not the actor. They're not the thing being forced. They're the thing forcing. The gravitational lensing explanation just doesn't fit the evidence. Well, the point is that they have claimed, that you have to be rigorous in this mathematical approach, and yet we don't see any math at all connected to any gravitational lensing theories. And why is that? Well, because you can't make any sense out of it mathematically. The people continue to deny it even when you show them. Well, they just deny everything. I mean, the only kind of deniers that are showing up here are people who are opposed to the very idea, because there's no God in it. No fluffy unicorns. Alright, at least Fat Boy swore bad, but your swearing is personal, hurtful. Made me feel sorry for the bitch. And fuck you. All I can say is my reactions are honest. So certainly it probably would be better for my achieving my goal and all of this other crap if I could temper, reform my personality, pretend. If I could pretend better, then yeah, I could be kinder and gentler and spew bullshit and pretend that I thought something different than I think. But what's the point of that? Isn't that seems anti my own philosophy? In some ways it's consistent in the sense that that's what intelligence has to do, is orchestrate its reactions and try to conform them to what you understand the necessary process to be. So I'm 50-50 on the subject. It's just one more harassment in a way. I mean, this whole process is a bit of a harassment, and it just seems even more of a harassment if I have to frickin' measure my responses and, say crap I can't stand. I don't even, I don't think I've sent a birthday card or a Christmas card in my life. I'm just, I'm just not that kind of person. I just don't do this, whatever it is, these social skills crap. Doesn't appeal to me at all. Like I said, you do it where you have to. You absolutely have to do it, well then you do it. But otherwise, yeah, hell with that. So anyway, the Robert Ritchie guy did post a comment that I deleted just because it was rubbish. But anyway, you could not answer a simple physics question. So he asked why the speed of light is the speed of light. And he says that's a simple physics question. I contend that there's nobody on Earth that has a rational reason to why that specific number is the speed of the fastest force, the fastest thing we know of. Nobody has that answer. It's a silly question to try to answer. There's absolutely no evidence about how those elemental functions of the universe became the elemental functions of the universe. It's just a useless question. Insanely stupid. I mean, it doesn't demonstrate my lack of knowledge, so again, it's just like some kind of dopey question. You walk up to a physicist and try to make them sound stupid. You say, why is the speed of light the speed of light? Well, he's not going to be able to answer your question. It's not relevant to his field. I mean, it's almost like asking a cook, how do you change a distributor? I mean, they can try to answer, but what's the point? It's not in their field. It's a religious question or something. It's just not a relevant physics question. It's a stupid question to ask. It's just evidence of your lack of understanding of the concepts being debated. It's not a debatable concept. There isn't a right and wrong answer. There just isn't, jackass. And so you don't understand how that's not irritating for some asshole to show up and start asking stupid ass bullshit questions when I just did a video explaining something that hasn't been explained rationally in 300 years. And I should just say, oh, thanks, fucker. No, you're an asshole. Without having a tantrum. I didn't have a tantrum. I honestly responded to an inanely stupid question that no person who gave a shit about understanding physics would bother asking. It's a question a 5-year-old would ask, not somebody who understands that there's questions that can't be answered. Anybody can take a little bit of a look at physics and understand what we can do experimentally and what we can't do experimentally. There's no experiment that's going to explain this question. All right. Physics arguments are not won by bullying or yelling, Gary. Again, I didn't bully you. You're like I said, you're the rude fucktard who's completely off the subject and then asking a question that might as well have been, what do you think God was thinking when he established the speed of light? What's the difference? There'd be no difference. You obviously have some other agenda. I've already pointed this out. Your agenda is completely different than my agenda on this channel. My agenda is to make the distinction between my physics and conventional physics. That's the agenda fundamentally. That mine is simple and more complete, and that theirs is stupid and unevidenced. That's my job here. I don't have any obligation to explain why the speed of light is the speed of light. That's just fucking stupid. Why would I even endeavor to answer such a question? Okay, I always watch your videos all the way through. So what? I've watched yours all the way through too. And they're stupid. What do you want me to say? I've never found them interesting. They're always convoluted mush. Alright, starting at 18 minutes, you begin your typical abuse towards anyone. No, to you specifically. At 18 minutes, I think, is your comment. Yes, I told the other assholes why I didn't like their comments, and I told you why I didn't like yours. Fuck. Towards anyone that asks a pertinent question. So again, you keep asserting that it's a pertinent question. I would argue that no physicist ever walks up to another physicist and says, why do you think the speed of light is the speed of light? Why isn't it like 3,468,705 meters per second or 6 meters per second? They never do that, asshole. Ever. Just doesn't happen as an encounter because both physicists know it's an unanswerable question. Shit for a brain. And it's so fucking uninteresting. I mean, what do you think the answer's going to be? Because God had that tattooed on his chest? I mean, what do you fucking think the answer would be if somebody could answer the question? What do you think the answer is going to be? It's going to be something like, well, because the triangular geometry of the universe couldn't possibly exist without blah, blah, blah. It's just going to be some mechanical reason that's dependent on the other things in the universe and their properties. This is the way it works. There's going to be some things that are just that way. And they're just that way because of really simple building blocks. Not complex building blocks, really simple reasons. It could fall left, it could fall right. And the reason it fell left is because a little tiny bit of bird shit hit one side and it fell that way. That's going to be the answer, you stupid fuck. Anyway. I've come to the conclusion that you are unable to hold a conversation, a constructive discussion. You can't discuss anything. We have no ground in which to build any conversation. You live in the wacky verse. I don't. I like reasonable arguments. You don't. I mean, it's just, there's no fucking thing. There's no common ground between us. You are complete tinfoil perfection in my book. Oh, Jesus. Anyway, about physics with anyone apart from yourself. Well, I would demonstrate that, yes, you people are fundamentally irrational. That's what I show in these videos and reading your comments. I'm just pointing out how you're irrational. Now, the fact that whether I'm the only rational person, well, man, maybe I'm the most rational, okay, in the sense that I can see, facts and add them up correctly. I can go, oh, yeah, there's a 2, yep, that equals 4. I'm really good at that. And you people suck at it. Yeah, that's basically the point I'm making. Okay. I resent your abuse. As I've pointed out to you on previous comments, I don't like your comments. Now, whether I resent them, yeah, well, maybe I did. I was pointing out how you're not feeding me in any way, buddy. I've already pointed that out clear in every other comment I ever read of yours. Did I ever have like a big smile on my face while I was reading any of your fucking comments? No. So I resent your constant distraction, your constant useless blather. You show up here and type mush on my videos. Fucking mush. Stupid mush. Let's see. And erroneous labels. No, I'm sorry. There's nothing erroneous about labeling you mushy tinfoil hat nutter. But anyway, you attach to me. I will not waste my time watching your BS anymore. Well, the BS hasn't changed any, so isn't that funny? Oh, you insulted me, therefore the BS changes entirely. The content was worth watching before for some reason, and all of a sudden it's not, and the only difference is you insulted me. You hurt my feelings. And you think that's rational? You really think that's a rational thing? You're making a reasonable argument. When I'll make the counter argument that, well, obviously you were here for something else then, right? You weren't here to glean some facts or to have your intelligence stimulated in some way or to put, try to get the A, B, C's in the right order, and maybe this guy has a way of manipulating them that can help me in my pursuits or something. You weren't doing any of that. You were sitting here waiting for me to say how cool you are. That's why you're watching the videos. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that wasn't going to happen. So, yeah, you might as well give up. That's not going to happen. I'm not a troll. Well, it all depends on what your definition of troll is. If, somebody with the mind of a 6-year-old's walking around in the body of a 35-year-old saying, I'm a very good driver, well, I call that trolling. I mean, maybe it's not as malicious and deliberate as some other asshole who just drives into me on purpose, but you're just as much of a problem. I mean, you're going the wrong way on the street and shit. So to me, it's the same thing as trolling. Put yourself, get yourself a whatever, an autopilot, airbag or something. I am a serious student of physics. Well, that's where I disagree with you. I don't think you're very serious. I don't, like I said, no serious physicist waste any time trying to figure out why the speed of light's the speed of light. It's just fucking a waste of your time. Preposterous waste of your time. Goodbye, Gary, and good luck with your primitive understanding. Now, there's the key phrase, right? Primitive understanding. What does that mean? What? So he thinks the small universe, the original universe, is something that can't be sticks and stones. It's not made of the primitive stuff. No, it's all shiny big skyscrapers and all kinds of fancy Jetsons buzzing around with fat robot maids and stuff. I don't think so. Okay, I also suspect that at least 2,000 of your subscribers are psychiatry students and doctors. Oh, I could type that on any video on the YouTubes, couldn't I? Whatever. Fine. Another one of your theories that I suspect is complete bullshit. So there again, you've speculated on the truth, and I think you've done it very poorly. So again, you're just proving my point. You people just talk a bunch of shit. If you're going to make an insult, you ought to make one that's got some chance to be true. You could just say, I think you're a jerk. Well, yeah, okay. You're entitled. That's fine. But that speculation seems really implausible. I don't think there's a chance in fuck that that's true, stupid. So again, you're wrong. Again, you're just being a reckless tinfoil hatter. You just spout shit that doesn't make any sense. You're not going to win with that argument. Bad theory. Bad theory. So anyway. Yeah, that's enough. Yeah, fuck off. I helped him by blocking him, so now he won't even have the temptation. But anyway, that's not this thing, right? Alright, so I guess we'll move along. Take a break, I guess. Come back and maybe attempt to reason with you people. I'm kind of distracted just because I'm right in the middle of trying to figure it out. The right hand rule. I just put all these little pieces together and it'll show up. The answer will rise out of the mush. But see, what's irritating is right in the middle of that, I'll think of something like frisbees, and then you start thinking about, hey, frisbees are fucked up because, the thing is spinning, right? And it does overcome drag in a way, right? I mean, frisbees seem to go really far for not throwing them very hard. They go a lot further than a baseball anyway, right? I think so. Well, anyway, you flick this thing and it spins. The funny thing is it's spinning towards you on one side, and that side that's spinning towards you is actually moving away from you, right? So even though it has every appearance that it's moving towards you, right? I mean, conceptually, you're saying it has to be moving towards me. It's moving the fuck towards me. But no, technically, it's moving away from you. It's gaining distance. Even though that side keeps coming right for me, that side never gets to me. It never gets any closer to me. It's getting further away from me, even though it's going right towards me. And that's, that's sort of the catch. That the one side is being dragged, but the other side's being helped along. Ironically, it's moving into more force, going the same way it's going, which is helping it go faster. So that's why the thing keeps going. It's because it's not dragging. And the only thing that's dragging is the stupid molecules. Get rid of them and, you know. Anyway. Yeah, so I'm just saying. Completely separate subject. It's sort of annoying that you know, little crap like that happens. So it's so hard to, you know, true focused concentration is difficult. I mean, it makes these lines in your head. You know, I got an awful lot of them. Anyway, till the next time. Well, till I decide to come back. I probably will decide to do that, but we'll see. I am kind of tired of it all. Pretty much. Where was I? Oh yeah, I was going to hit that button. Yeah, I should be back. Yeah, so this will be kind of just a draft bit of the video. So I've been watching these Mike Young from, I don't know, somewhere in California. Very few views for these, you know, physics lectures. Some kind of city college, Santa Barbara City College, something like that. Well, anyway, I guess that's what it means, Santa Barbara Community College. Anyway, he's quite theatrical and all that kind of stuff. Seems to know his physics, whatnot. You know, pretty good. I'm just surprised. The view numbers are kind of low. You know, there's thousands. You know, below 10,000 kind of numbers. And you know, you'd think all the Indian people would have flocked here for the free education. But anyway, but it's the same jargon as the Professor Lewin thing and the, you know, Yale thing, and, you know, whoever you listen to, it's all the same stuff. They just keep pushing. Maxwellian perceptions of reality. Not that the math is all that bad, but I just mean it's, they are generalizations, and they're not conceptual statements, you know, except where Maxwell claims there's no magnetic monopoles. And they take that seriously for no good reason. But they only take it seriously because their mathematics is bisected. They've wrongly assumed that there's two forces, I mean, two fundamental force fields of some kind. Which is probably right, is to, you know, in a sense, but they're not recognizing that it's all one. The same fields are creating all phenomena. So this idea of positive and negative electric is the same as north-south magnetic. And there really isn't a distinction. There's just how you shape those fields. That is how you make magnets and how you make charge. And charge is a surface phenomenon. And magnetism goes deeper. And there's simple things that kind of show that. The fact that high voltage doesn't make good magnets, high amperage does, you know, in terms of electricity. So you're really saying, what's the difference between the two? Well, amperage is sort of telling you how many atoms are helping push a force along, and voltage is telling you how much pressure each is passing along. So high voltage means you can involve very few atoms because you're sending a lot of stuff through, and high amperage means you're involving a lot of atoms but low pressure. And that's all the difference there is between charge and magnetism, in a sense, that the high voltage will give you a charge phenomenon, where the low voltage at high amperage will give you the magnetic phenomenon. And it just means that you're affecting more atoms. So I could make that simple argument. That seems a pretty simple one to make. So anyway, so just, you know, all of their theory, it has to do with this idea that the distinction between magnetism and electricity has something to do with the idea that they understand the concept of the charge plus, you know, and then you have a minus charge. And we know them as electrons and protons. Well, protons and electrons. But regardless, maybe I should try colors, but I don't know. Where's my blue? Blue. See if blue shows up at all. Well, then we'll decide. So we'll make the electron blue. Let's see if the blue is even visible. Yeah, it's pretty visible actually. Not terrible. We'll go with it. I could just use pink and blue and see how that works out. Or yellow and blue might even be better. All right. So yeah, let's play along. See how the yellow shows up. We'll compare it to the pink. Let's see which one's more visible. Yellow's probably better. All right. So this is the element, and they sort of understand that these things do this. You know, if I put another positive charge over here, that I get a repulsion. Draw that like that, I suppose. And then if I put another negative charge over here, I get a repulsion between these two. So they're getting some of this, right? You know, so not all escape them. And that these things, for some reason, okay, move towards each other, you know, in those directions. So they got that part, you know, that they can, you know, they understand the concept of the attraction, the repulsion, but somehow they're making a distinction between this electrical thing and this charge phenomenon. See, electrical is a fake word, really, because there's charge, okay, and then electricity is when you're taking, you're moving charge through a conductor. You know, you call that electricity. But there's no electricity in any other sense. I mean, there's charge, and then there's moving charge through a wire, which is electricity, a conductor. But you have to have the conductor. Electricity doesn't exist without the conductor. There's no electricity field. There's a charge field. So, you know, they're sort of screwing it up by calling it an electric field, when no, it's the charge field. And then in magnetism, it's the same thing. I mean, when the atom has a polarity, that is, one side is decidedly more exposed to this, this stuff. You know, this stuff. Okay, this yellow stuff, and then you have this blue stuff. You can just kind of get the idea that, all right, you have two kinds of stuff, all right? And so if it's the same stuff, it's going to repel, and so you get the idea that it reflects. So blue stuff reflects off of blue stuff, and that'll give you an explanation for that. And then you can just say this yellow stuff reflects off of yellow stuff, and that would give you an explanation for this repulsion. And then you have to just figure out, well, why does this blue stuff somehow doesn't, okay, reflect? Just kind of goes through that. And this yellow stuff kind of just goes through this. And then you have to kind of understand that there's still a pressure from the external universe of blue and red, I mean blue and yellow. And that external stuff is going to end up pushing this into that and this into that, because both of them are going to get pushed from the external world. So once you've gotten rid of this, no reflections, then you've got all this external pressure, you know, and no yellow stuff could ever get in here. See, the yellow stuff would be coming from the external universe and push on that, and the blue stuff would push on this, you know, coming from the external universe. So you kind of understand that the blue never hits the yellow and the yellow never hits the blue here, so that's why there's less pressure between these two and these two. Okay, but and there's more pressure just because there's reflections, and so you can sort of make a rational diagram of it and say, okay, I get that. All right, well, anyway, so the point I was making about the, see, they say there's no monopole because they can't seem to figure out how to construct, you know, you can't pull, well, obviously I can't pile a bunch of electrons together and, you know, they won't stick to each other, they don't like each other, they're going to repel each other. So the fact that there's nothing in nature where a bunch of electrons are sitting right next to each other all happy isn't too hard to say, oh yeah, I get why that is. But the opposite example, this probably is the right color, yeah, is you do have this nucleus idea that's full of protons, you know, just full of them, and neutrons. But I mean, the point is that it's decidedly, a nucleus is decidedly, you know, radiating a monopolistic force. And certainly, logically, they state that an electron is doing the same thing. It's always negative. but then they say somehow it has a dipole moment. You know, that somehow, you know, which doesn't make any sense, right? So they've created all this spin crap too. So they got this thing whirling around here and going a speed, and then they make this statement that when this charge is moving, then it's creating magnetism. You know, somehow. So it's only when this thing's moving that there's magnetism, and they take that from the fact that when, you know, there's electricity moving through a wire, okay, it creates magnetism. So, you know, you end up with a polarizing effect. You end up with attraction and repulsion, but it's kind of a complex attraction and repulsion depending on how you're moving these charges in the wire. Depends on what you're going to get. Alternating current, direct current does different things, but you are going to get an effect. You're going to get a polarized radiation out of it of some kind, okay, that's going to affect charges. Like if I put a charge near the wire, the charge is going to move. It's not going to move because of electricity. It's going to move because there's force. There's this repulsive stuff. The blue stuff is coming out and hitting the electron. That's the reason why the electron's going to move, is because you're making blue stuff that's going to push it. And the same is true for the proton. But there's just no reason to say this is a charged monopole, and we understand that a proton is a charged monopole and an electric monopole, without saying it's obviously also the magnetic monopole. And I can make a monopole of magnetism in the sense that that's what the nucleus is, essentially. But what good is it? Yeah, it doesn't have any real value. So, but I don't understand, you know, the conversation just doesn't make any sense. Again, and they argue that somehow this thing is spinning in some way. They don't say it's real spin, but what they're saying is that somehow there's a secret component to this electron that's actually a proton. You know, and somehow you can orient it in some way to make it be a yellow thing instead of a blue thing. And there's no evidence you can do that electrons anywhere behave that way, that they'll ever be attracted to the north end of a magnet. They'll always be repelled by it. So why are they saying it? You know, it doesn't make any sense. You know, it's a huge continuity error in terms of there's just zero evidence. Not like there's a little evidence. There's just no evidence that electrons have any dipole capacity, any capacity to behave like an atom. So anyway, so you know, this is where it all goes. This is their starting point is bad, so the whole thing just goes, you know, just goes wrong. Because they're starting with these premises that aren't realizing what real mechanisms are. All right, so anyway, so the thing I've been thinking about is the motor forces. Sometimes is what it's called, but you can say the right-hand rule. The idea that there's a complexity to this thing, like you could set up a field of a magnet, you know, a north end and a south end of a magnet. And that if you put a wire in here with a current, let's say going into the board, you know, the wire's going this way and the current's going this way, that somehow the force, the way this thing will move, the wire won't move towards the south side or towards the north side. It won't show any polarity that way. It's going to show some kind of weird polarity where it's going to just fly the fuck out of here, or it's going to shoot the fuck down here. It's going to make a turn. You know, right turn if it's going in, and left turn if it's going out. You know, by little hand rules you can use to figure out which way it's going to go, but it's not going to do what you would think it would do, because there's no polarization up and down. Okay, there's polarization this way and this way, and up just doesn't make any sense, because up is being both. It's being something you can't. How does a force going this way and a force, let's say, coming out of this? See, they have this idea that this stuff is going in and this stuff is, you know, that one side is producing out stuff and one side is producing in stuff, like it's two arrows that way, when they're not understanding that it's not two arrows that way, it's two opposite forces. you know, one yellow, one blue. So that's like a key axiom problem they have. It's this idea that they think they're just blue arrow goes this way and blue arrow comes out of this thing. So they think, you know, the proton is like an electron with the arrows going the wrong way. You know, so they're trying to make it out of one force, and you can't do that. You know, you can't do this going in thing. Can't happen. There's no place to go into. There's no place for it to. Can't go anywhere. There's no conservation. You have to have reflections, and it has to come back out again. Equilibrium says it has to. Can't just go all in, and there's no out. It's nonsensical. So anyway, that's where they, you know, they have a broken understanding from the beginning, and so that makes their explanation silly. But obviously the phenomenon is there to be explained. I mean, the right-hand rule is correct. I mean, it does behave as if, but the idea of the force moving in a direction, that's kind of stupid. It's clearly moving from negative to positive, you could argue, in the sense that or positive to negative. No, you could argue either way, so that doesn't matter. There's no, well, anyway. But the point is that this is moving in a direction that doesn't seem coherent to the process of it being repelled by one side and it being attracted to the other side. There being an absence of force here, a low pressure and a high pressure here, or vice versa. It's not doing that. It's not going this way and that way. It's going this weird up and it's weird down thing. All right, and the other example of this phenomenon, another related, okay, I don't know if it's the same example actually, but it's clearly related in the sense that this is a wire. So the difference here is that this can be a permanent magnet, okay? It can be an electromagnet, but I'm just saying it's a magnet made out of iron doing something. I mean, all the little filings lining up and blah, blah, blah. Well, it doesn't even have to be iron. It's just a lot of atoms making a magnet. And so you know that inside here is a bunch of, you know, plus and minus, north and south magnets lined up, you know, that they're all in the same configuration. And those little magnets are atoms. So, I mean, clearly the monopoles are the atoms. The electrons are on one end, the protons on the other end. We know all that. So it's stupid to say this isn't the same thing as electricity. And the only thing different about it is the fact that now you're lining up all these atoms and they're adding their polarity to each other. This polarization means that, you know, blue stuff always goes this way and yellow stuff always goes this way. And so you're just magnifying that effect. The more of these little atoms you put together, the more force you collect from the universe, and the more of it ends up going, all the yellow stuff goes this way and all the blue stuff goes that way. Well, I obviously had to do it the wrong way for this diagram, but anyway, turn my screen back on. Why? Because I like it. I miss it. Yeah, I guess I have to hit the power button. Okay, try that. Anyway, technology. Yeah, you do have to force it to comply. All right, so the other example, that's where I was, right? Other example. I guess I could leave this example and try to write the other example without messing up this example. So the other example is you have these two wires. Probably should draw them in neutral colors, but whatever. This is the color they are. So you have two wires and you put electricity through them. And if you put them in the same direction, logically that would say to you, oh, they should repel, because, you know, one side's going to have a northy kind of side and the other side's going to have a southy kind of side, because it's, you know, it's going to be lower pressure at one end, you know, voltage. You know, it's like you're putting, whatever, 12 volts in here, and you're putting in a ton of it, you know, a lot of it. So obviously you're using all the atoms to transmit the pressure. So you got low voltage but very high amperage. So you're shooting a ton through here, and you're polarizing all these atoms in some respect. But you know, logically you say to yourself, it's DC current. This side should be, you know, well, this is sort of opposite color wise. So let me just move the arrows the opposite way, and then I'll solve that problem. You're pumping the electrons. See, they think you're pumping electrons. You're really not. You're pumping photons. You're pumping the little force bits. So you're pushing those in. And by pushing those in, there's going to be more of them at this end, logically, than there will be at this end, because you're letting them come out this end. So anyway, the idea would be is that these would be repulsive. But what really happens is this bends towards this, and this bends towards that. And the two wires bend towards each other. They attract. And you're saying, well, why should they do that? Doesn't make much sense. And then if you do the opposite polarity, you know, you just reverse the circumstance and have one of them going, the current going down, and one of them the current going up, then they're going to repel. You know, they both go out this way and repel each other, when no, they're opposites. Opposites should attract. So it's, you know, intuitively nonsensical. It's not fitting the pattern. And the thing to understand is yeah, well, it's not made of permanent magnets. It's, you know, we're polarizing atoms by pushing electrons through. So it's not as simple as, you know, making a magnet, having iron and magnetizing it, or arranging the already polarized atoms like this, you know, arranging a bunch of polarized atoms in the right orientation. It's just not the same thing that's happening. Alright, so what I would add to that is, alright, so just in thinking about it, the idea of why do they think the charge has to move to create magnetism. So this is the silly part, right? Okay, I'm saying it's silly, just because they should be able to figure out that movement has a consequence, but it doesn't change what the charge is doing. The charge is the same, whether it's moving or not moving. It's still a charge. It's radiating a force. So when it's standing still, it's radiating a force. Obviously, when you move it, you're going to change how that force radiates. Okay, you're going to maybe, as you move it, okay, I'm going to use a different color. It doesn't mean there's a different force. I'm just saying, as you radiate it, it becomes more reflective in one direction than it is in the other direction. That is, if a force was to come at this thing that's moving away from me, there's less chance of me having an interaction. But if it's moving towards me, there's more chance of an interaction. So you could argue it's reflecting more in the direction that it moves. So in the direction that it moves, it starts to make more force. And the direction from which it's, the way it's not going, okay, is less force, which, you know, I guess you could just represent by cutting some of the force off. So now it's, the charge is kind of polarized, right? Now it's not polarized in the sense that there's no yellow stuff coming out of it, but it's polarized in the sense that the blue stuff has a huge bias, okay? And likewise, there is probably an interaction with the yellow stuff, and it's probably going to have the opposite bias. So you could imagine that there is sort of an opposite bias in how it's going to react to yellow now too. Just as how it's going to react to blue is changing, how it's going to react to yellow is changing. And that's what the movement is causing, you could argue, is a kind of polarization of the charge, in the sense that now it's becoming, yeah, okay, this might, you know, I hadn't thought of saying it this way. This sort of fits their argument that the electron is dipolar, because you could argue that it's becoming bluer at one end, okay, really hard blue, all right, really blue, and it's becoming kind of yellow on the other end. You know, so as you're moving it, you're concentrating its blueness to this end and increasing its yellowness to this other side. I don't know if I need to do that. It's just blue or no blue might be the real answer. But regardless, you can just see how the pattern has changed now. It's more reflective in the direction it's moving. It's less reflective in the direction it's leaving. Okay, I mean the back end. You can't hit it from the back very well. You can hit it really easy from the front. You reflect really easy off the front. It's really hard to reflect off the other side because the mirror is running away from you. So there's, you know, no pressure happening here, you know, and higher pressure happening here. Okay, so it's becoming more of a charge even. You could say the charge is increasing in the direction of the motion. So then if you go back to the wire example, yeah, we got room here. You might understand that what's happening to the atoms, okay, is a bunch of little virtual photons, as they would call them, you know, a bunch of energy. It's being pumped in, not necessarily electrons. See, they think these electrons are actually going from here, and then they're going over here, and there'll be a bunch of electrons piled up. Now, what's really happening is the electrons are pressurizing. That is, when you push more electrons in here, the electrons are getting closer together, right? And electrons don't like each other. So you're taking electrons that are normally... I can't see that. All right, time to erase. With a not wet enough towel. Which is extremely challenging. Yeah, colors don't come off as easy. Anyway, what was I going to... Okay, so, yeah, so, you know, if you had an atom in its normal state, the electrons have a certain distance from each other, you know, and it's called peace and quiet, or whatever you want to call it. That's their equilibrium. And so when you add, you know, energy here, you push it, then you have more electron closer to each other. And so if there was a proton over here, you could sort of understand that this proton is now completely, this atom is completely different. It has, this electron is now way too close. This polarity thing was neutral, and now it's going to be something other than neutral. You know, it's going to be unneutral. Yeah, cool. Play on words. Well, play on letters. So it's going to lose its neutrality. It's going to become kind of polar just because of you've condensed the electrons. You've forced them closer together, more of them in an area, and now it's going to be, for a moment, this is going to look like, you know, a north side of a magnet. This is going to look decidedly any. Okay, this is very any over here, because you got too much electron there. And when you put too much electron too, where's the proton going to go? Well, it's going to tend to move in the direction that you got more electrons. It likes electrons, so it's going to move towards the electrons too. So in a sense, this whole thing, okay, is going to tend to bulge, and that's going to make it even more any, because now you're moving the charges up. Yeah. Well, it doesn't, I don't know if you need to go that many steps. The idea is all you're doing is this extra pressure has a consequence. And you could argue that it's going to move electrons. And so you could think of that as being, you're going to kind of take something that was peaceful, and in a sense, because they're going in this direction, the movement, that you're sort of changing the polarity on an angle. So you're sort of squirting this force, okay, wants to go straight through the conductor. So that's a concept I had. Okay, it wants to go straight through, but there's a bunch of electrons in the way. So it has to, you know, they're sort of in the way, you know, and they're connected to a proton. So you could understand this sort of in a governor kind of way, like there's a regulator. So there's this relationship between the electrons and the protons. Now if I'm shoving these electrons closer to each other, which means there's a bunch of force between them that's pushing, you know, so there's pressure. The idea would be is that the electron is going to move in that direction a little bit. And by moving in that direction, it has to move down. Okay, so it's moving down as it moves in that direction, because it's still attached to its proton. And so, and as it does that, as it moves down, it exposes the, you know, if you had an electron on a lever, you know, on a stick, and you push a bunch of stuff this way, and the electron moves this way, you know, instead of straight across, you could sort of understand that all this force now doesn't have to hit the electron. It goes straight to the next electron. And if that one tilts down, you know, so we'll move them now, we'll tilt them down here. Well, then that force will keep going to the next one. And if that one tilts down, then the force keeps going to the next one. So in a sense, all these electrons could just be pushing down. And as they're pushing down on this side, the other side has to push out. You know, the other side of the wire. You know, so because it's compressing. So when this electron pushes down, it pushes on this electron here and pushes him down. So now you've converted energy this direction into energy this direction, right? Because now you're pushing electrons down. So now you have motion in this direction and you have motion in this direction. And yeah, so now you have now you can sort of better understand why it moves perpendicular. Something might move perpendicular because you actually have force now moving perpendicular. You've pushed one electron, which pushed another electron, and as the force moves, as the wave moves, the pressure, the bulge down here moves. Okay, that means that the electron has to move back up. All right, when it moves back up, it makes blue force. So the force will actually start leaking out. And the other thing you have to understand is when this wire is in a magnetic field, this process gets interrupted. You know, there ends up being more energy leaves the conductor, and you can sort of see that because the voltage will drop. Okay, you'll start using the energy that's going through the wire, and that's the energy that's going to move the wire. So the energy to move the wire comes from the electricity in the wire, the force in the wire, and now more of it has to be leaked out. And by leaking out, it's affecting the magnet. You know, the forces are hitting the different surfaces, and there's going to be a physical reaction. The physical movement is this whole piece of stuff is going to, this whole wire is going to move because of this force. Okay, that it still has to push against something, so there has to be a magnet pushing. So I don't want to get too far from that. Well, anyway, you might have gotten some of this. So the idea is you can regulate how much force moves and how quickly it moves by how much these little things can tilt. And the idea would be is if you're in a magnetic field, the magnetic field wants to pull them back up, right? So these electrons are pushing down to let the current through, and then you put it in a magnetic field, then those electrons start going back up because they're attracted to the magnetic field, or they're pushed down even more, letting even more stuff through. So on one side they're going to be pushed down, the other side they're going to be pushed in. And so one side the current's going to be moving, the voltage, the little bits can move quickly. The other side they're moving really slowly, and part of the consequence of that, the reason why they're moving slowly, is more electrons are being pushed back into it and then being pushed back down. So there's more motion of the electron in the downward direction. Yeah, now I've got so many cards on the table, it's gotten a little too confusing. So maybe I'll come back for a summation and such. You know, conceptually, just to understand it. I mean, the magnetism in the wire is different than magnetism made by iron filings or iron atoms. So when you magnetize iron, you're doing something fundamentally different than when you're magnetizing the copper in a conductor, because one is completely dependent on motion. You got to move the electrons to make the atoms have polarity. You have to force the electrons to be closer to each other. You can think of it as expanding the atom, you can think of it as warping its shape, but the point is you have to change the atoms, and that's what the electricity is doing by interacting with the electrons in one direction, it's pushing electrons in one direction. The electrons have a tendency to move towards protons, so they move in another direction. And it's that extra direction that's going to cause motion. And the field, the magnetic field, either accelerates that process of misdirection, or it creates no obstacle to it. So it's either pushing electrons into the flow or pushing them out. And how much they're being pushed into it and out of it will depend on how much motion there is in this alternative direction. So the stuff wants to go this way, and the electrons are forced to wobble this way, which is causing the problem. That's the essential argument. Developing that completely. See, there was one other thing I wanted to... yeah, well, I'll come back. Yeah. Alright, back. Finish up, I think. So you can see the average is back to its normal, so whatever that blip was, it was transitory. It has no... it doesn't mean anything, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, not likely to have a consequence or whatever. So the idea would be is that what's happening in the two wires, I should have waited for that to dry, I guess. I would argue is to think of it in terms of if the magnets were, so this is let's just do the alternative path thing that causes, well, let's do the same direction that's causing, yeah, let's do the opposite because that's causing repulsion. So the opposite should attract, but they're going to end up repelling. So you could sort of make the argument that the magnets are aligning in an orientation, right? So they're pointed in a direction. And so the direction would be obviously the opposite for the two sides. So this one's going this way, so the lines would be going this way. So if you thought of those as being polarized lines, so I'll put a little extra on them. A little bit of blue here on the outside. You could sort of understand that it's going to be blue on blue. In the sense that this energy that's leaking, let's call it the leaking energy, is leaking this way, and the leaking energy here is leaking that way, and those two are going to cause the perpetual reflections that you need to cause repulsion, and that means that the two opposites are going to repel because you're magnifying the directional force. The electrons are causing the problem, and both sides will be pushing out, so to speak, and so they're going to maximize that conflict. And then when you have the opposite scenario where they're both going the same way, obviously that's not going to happen, and you're going to have both forces in essence pointing the same way. So even if you have them both pointing the same way, you're not pointing a negative into a negative. You're shooting blues this way, and you're shooting blues this way. Well, that doesn't do you any good because there's no blue here to hit. So you're just shooting blue force at blue force, but you're not shooting blue force at blue object. And you have to shoot it at the blue object to create repulsion. So that's why the wires move into each other, is you've disengaged the north-south of the magnet by essentially shooting the field into places where they're not going to hit anything but the other south pole, which means the exact opposite result, in the sense that the only thing you can hit is the yellow side, so to speak, with the blue force. And so you're not going to gain anything because that's the attractive mechanism, not the repulsive mechanism. That's not even that's not even relevant. The point is that you'll have the possibility of reflections here, and there's no possibility of reflections when the magnets are pointing in the same direction. The south stuff's all going out, and the blue stuff isn't pointed at each other, so it can't hit each other. and so that's why they move apart. And just understand, it's kind of a weak force in wire. So when I do this with wires, you have to send in a ton of amperage. So you have to have the voltage low and affect all the atoms by having the transfers happening by lots of energy coming in, lots of volume. Okay, so if you understood that the pressure was just going to be an argument about volume, okay, of how much stuff you're sending in, but more realistically, the stuff being sent in is going to be sent in by how much momentum you give the electron that pushes in. So electron pushes in at a speed. The faster it pushes in, the more pressure it creates on that electron, which transfers it to the next electron and transfers it to the next electron. The higher number of electrons you push a little bit, okay, that's your amperage. So you push a lot of electrons, but you push them slow. They hit a lot of these atoms, and all these atoms are engaged in the process, and they all polarize to be able to create this magnetic effect. So you can't magnetize a conductor unless you're engaging all the atoms, as many atoms as possible, because the only way to polarize the atom is to force it to do a pressure transfer. And if you do the pressure through high voltage, you only affect a few electrons in the conductor. And you need to affect a lot of electrons to polarize all those atoms, to give them all this orientation. Alright, that's probably enough. So, as stated, this is all sort of still drafty. Okay, but it's going to get tighter soon. It just depends on how much time I can devote to it, and you need those quality moments. That's what yeah, just eureka kind of stuff happens. There's a certain formula to it, but I haven't got that down. I mean, you just play with it, and eventually it falls into place. So it's trial and error, you know. So I'll keep trialing until I don't have much error. So that's it. I think we're done. So till next time and such, so forth and whatnot.